Okay, so today I'm in Stars Mayfair VIP Lounge, quite fittingly, because I've got one with me, Jerry White. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us today, Jerry.
Pleasure.
So you've been in the game literally man and boy.
Yeah.
So what's your current role in bookmaking at the moment?
Currently, I've been doing some work for the last 6 years with Kaluki. They're an on-course company. They've got a WhatsApp betting business as well. I've worked extensively at the point-to-point with different bookmakers. I did some work last year with Barry Johnson. I've done some on-course stuff with Richard Lyles. So anyone who wants to kind of use me, I do bits for. A few of my sort of stalwarts, but most, modern times, the last sort of 6 years, it's been stuff with Kaluki. From when they first came to me and asked me to be involved with them, getting their licence, and just being involved with the setup of their company, really.
Now they seem to be one of the sharper operators on the track.
Yeah, they're young. Like James is young, and there's a lot of young people around the firm. James's friends, and they've got their office side of the business is quite youthful. It's a lot of younger people. And yeah, just not really nice people. And as I say, I was approached when they were sort of setting up, and so I was there from the formative period of it. We were struggling initially when it was set up to find a name for the company, and I remember tossing things over in my head and coming up with the name Kaluki. I used to play Kaluki a lot in the snooker halls. I used to play in Burton's, in Margate, and I used to play in Stoke Newington at Corals and different places. So this name came out the hat, Kaluki, and they went, yeah, we like that name, let's go with that. So I kind of like that, because so many people come up and go, oh man, my dad used to play that, my uncle used to play that, we loved it. And I used to play Kaluki on the trains going to the racetracks with a lot of kind of well-known people now that some are still involved in horse racing. We used to play on the train.
But Rocky told me that when I interviewed
Yeah.
him. So I had the pleasure of meeting you for the first time in a February wet point-to-point in Devon, but you're actually from a long way from Devon, in Kent. So where is home for you?
Yeah, home for me is Westgate-on-Sea, which is in between Birchington and Margate. I was originally from Ealing in London, in West London, and we moved down to Margate in 1967. And we bought a bungalow there really cheap. I think we paid 900 quid for it in 67, the late summer of 67. I think I was about four or 5 months old. And I still live in the same bungalow today. And my girlfriend lives in the East End in Bow, so I go down there for a week, and then I go to sort of up to see her, sort of like week on, week off. So I spend quite a lot of time in London too.
Now you had an unusual entry into the game via a schoolmaster.
Yeah, I was struggling at school a bit. I very poor attention span. Not a troublemaker, I wouldn't say, but someone who always needed, a big head, someone who always needed to be noticed, colourful, I'd say, and popular. But I was always the practical joker, and I was always trying to sort of, get in with a lot of the older guys, and I think I was a bit sort of older than my years. I think people have always said, oh, Jerry, you've always been 40, like when I was 20. So
Compliment now.
Yeah. So my mum said to me, look, I'm really not well, Jerry. I was 12, and she said, I think I'm having a mental breakdown. So I'm going to have to put you in a children's home. And obviously it was a daunting prospect. I'd never been away from home before. I was an only child. My mum was older anyway. She had me very late in life. She had me at 46, and she wasn't married or anything. She kind of had met a guy, got pregnant. It was a bit taboo in the 60s, obviously, not to have a child out of wedlock. And she told me that she looked up one day and saw a big billboard, and it said Dr. White's tampons and sanitary towels, and just called herself Mrs. White, and got a £5 ring from a jeweller's, put it on her finger, went back around where she sort of was known, and said, my husband's left me, I was married, and just concocted a story to that effect. And anyway, she put me into this children's home. I was there for a year. It was a place in Broadstairs. It was called Lanthorn House. And I was there for a year, and during that year period, two of the teachers there, the assistant headmaster and stuff, said, Jerry's someone that if it's channeled in the right way, if things will work for him. He's very intelligent. He's very quick with figures. He's very good with people. Forget all the other things. He's good with people. He's got a warmth, something obviously at an early age they must have seen in me. And he's good. He's good with the other children that have got problems. He'll put his arm around them. He's warm, and he doesn't suffer fools. Even at his age, he's clever. He keeps himself to himself, and we think you should put him up for common entrance for public school. So my mum spoke to me about it, and they said that maybe I could get a bursary to go somewhere, but I'd have to sit common entrance first. So I took common entrance in 3 schools. I took it at Bethany School for Boys in Curtiston Green. I did I sat for common entrance at Harrow, and I think the other one I sat common entrance for was Tunbridge. I got over 90% with each of them, so I could. And the Kent County Council said that they would fund me to go for 2/3 of the fees. My mum had to find a third, and I was going to go to Harrow, and decided against Harrow because it was just that bit too far away, and I couldn't. I wanted to try and come back at weekends if I could. But Curtiston Green, Bethany, was the boys' version of where the Royals went, but like the Benenden, and I kind of liked that. And you could do horse riding there, and it was really, really good. So I decided to go there. That was my choice, and I went to Bethany, and I stayed there till I was 17.
And there was a housemaster that took you
There was a housemaster there called Clifford Jordan, who was one of the most influential people in my life. And he had dogs at Maidstone Dog Track. He had greyhounds there with a trainer called Tom Gates, and he was a choir master. So all his dogs had a chorister prefix, chorister Mercato, chorister Toccato, all these different names. And he was really nice. He was gay, so I used to say to all my other friends, you know, there's nothing happening here. And they're like, no, you go down in his MG Sports, I bet he's got his hand on your gear stick and stuff like that. And I was like, listen, please, there's no need for talk like that. I'll have to give you a punch on the nose if you carry on like that. And that was how I'd learned to defend myself, with humour. And if I needed to get a little bit rough and tumble, I could too. So we used to go down to the dogs to Maidstone Dog Track to watch his dogs run. And from the minute I stepped foot onto that track, I realised it was something I loved. And dog racing for me was probably, it's played a bigger part probably in my life than horse racing. But I stood there one day and watched the bookmakers, how they interacted with each other. They were quite flamboyant in those days. I know Maidstone wasn't like a big grade 1 track, but it was full of very, very clever bookmakers. And that was where I was introduced to the John Power firm, the Power firm there, which was run by Robbie and Concord, and I used to get the drinks for them, and I would sometimes help do the bag and different bits and bobs. And that is where I kind of started off at Maidstone Dog Track in the dog world.
Now, you made it your business to get involved with the top
I did.
sort of people.
I could see that the people that where the bigger bets, the bookies where the bigger bets went to, was probably the best place for me, because I thought, well, you know, if they're taking the bigger bets, maybe I can sort of like make a job for myself. I can find an in by asking to do things, and I got very interested very quickly. So 3 or 4 weeks later, I went for the second time, and I thought, well, you know, I got even more passionate about it. It got to the stage where I was sort of bunking off school, say twice a week, and getting a bus into Maidstone so I could actually go to the dog track. And I remember that there was only one ring, but I watched the floormen working, and they were all very smart. And I thought to myself, well, wouldn't it be great if I could sort of, you know, have a smart suit and wander around doing that? And there was a special kudos around, you know, bookmaking. Even back in the day when I came, there was still these wonderful characters in there, these larger-than-life characters, which there's not so many of around now. So I saw that at a spitting sawdust place like Maidstone, and that's where I kind of fell in love with dog racing. That was my first into dog racing.
So how were the powers in their pomp?
Well, I didn't have very much to do with Tom. I occasionally had a bet with him at Walthamstow and everything, but funnily enough, I had a conversation with Tom at Cheltenham a couple of years ago when I was back out with Kaluki. Tom was working with Star Sports, And I said, oh, hello, and he was like, hello, all right. I said, good to see you. And he said, oh, he said, good to see you, nice to see you again. He said, I've had a blooming accident with a bus. He said, I got hit by a bus trying to cross the road. And I said, I bet I know, come off worse. He said, no, Jerry, I did. He said, he's done my shoulder and stuff. And I'd said to Tom about how I had a great rapport with John and how I took some of the biggest bets back in the dog day to John when he was involved in I hate to use the word, but kind of that war of attrition period at Hackney Wick with Tony Morris when they were like at war with each other. And I got on very well with Tony. Tony was a great personal friend and mentor, sadly no longer with us. But I was always taken by John. And if John was ever at the races and I was there, John would give me a big hug and a big kiss. He'd always put a cigar in my pocket or something. Wherever he went, I kind of went. It was known that if John was at the horses, which he didn't go to too often, but he would go on occasions. I remember him coming back from Northern Cyprus some years back and standing on the rails. And I was there that day when he was there, and to me it was just everything. John was the most flamboyant bookmaker, in my opinion, there's ever been. And I mean this, horses and dogs. You can have your gentleman bookmakers, you know, your Victor Chandlers, and you can have Tony Morris and different people, but John was just mind-blowingly charismatic. You know, there is no summing up how cool John was. You know, from the second you saw John, sometimes he could have a full-length fur coat on. There was always beautiful women around him, but there was just this air of, I don't give a toss. You know, people. He was the pulse beat. People came to John because they could talk to him. He spoke the same to a tramp as he would speak to an earl. He was just magical. And from the cigar smoke coming out of his mouth to the aftershave that he had on, to his lovely golden locks that flew, he was like a Hollywood matinee idol. He was the biggest, most important character in English bookmaking modern day.
Now, people talk about those guys as being fearless as bookmakers. How many punters were sharp enough to worry them back in those days?
Not many. Not many. I think that you know, I don't know so much, obviously, with Tom, but with John, I would think John obviously had very good people around him. Obviously, Philly was always there on the bag. Philly was watching everything. I don't know who did John's tissue for him. I know that, like with Tony Morris, Minnie always did his card. They always had very good people behind them. So I would always think that the people that John had wrapped round him would be cleverer than the people that were betting with him. So I should think the smaller punters would have been the people that marked the bigger bookmakers' cards. If you stood at a track like Hackney, for example, and it was an afternoon meeting and it was, you know, a standard race card, and someone that you respected, that you knew was very, very well connected, might have an average bet of, say, a tenner. If they came in and had 50 quid on something, it would be a way of marking somebody's card like that, knowing that the next bet might come in, it might be £300 or £400 on that same dog, and he could obviously lay them, or it gives you choices if you forewarns, forearmed. But I don't think many people put the fear of God up him. I don't think it, to be truthful, I never saw anybody. He never refused a bet. In a graded race one day when he was at war with Tony Morris, I was putting on for John Ginger McGee, his biggest punter, Danny Damnier. I used to put his bets on. I came down the stairs one day, Danny had said to me, get what you can on this dog. And I said, what sort of figure? And he said, well, you know, anything, 50,000. I went down to John, who was standing on the joint. Tony Morris had sort of like put his hand up as much as to say anything for me, Thanet. He always used to call me Thanet, Tony Morris. So I avoided him. I went to John. I said, Danny Damnier wants a big bet in this race. He said, how much is big? I said, well, he's talking like anything up to 50,000. He said, have you got the money, Jerry? I said, I've got that and over. He said, that's fine. You go back and tell him he's got it. He can have the price that's on the board. I said, well, there's nothing there. And he said, there is now. And he put up evens. So he said, there's the price. And I looked back up and I could see that Ginger was there and someone else was there and the nod came. I don't think in a graded race, at any afternoon meeting at any dog track, anyone's had a bigger bet than £50,000 in cash. The dog was tailed off. It didn't come out the traps. It came out very slowly, got a smack at the bend, finished last.